It was one of those times when Johnny Carson was away. And this time, comedian Joan Rivers was filling in. It wasn't the first time, and she was a little bit before my time, but even then, even now, audiences know what to expect from Joan Rivers, right? If you had to pick somebody to go toe-to-toe with Mr. Rogers, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone better than Joan Rivers. Now, this clip is easy enough to find online, unlike these episodes. Mr. Rogers is the second guest of the night, and you know how that goes. The other one shuffles down, but nobody knows. I don't know who the first one is. Joan Rivers seems to forget pretty quickly, too. She tries her best, Joan Rivers does, to do what Joan Rivers does, and rapid fire, risque comment, pause for reply, but she is no match for Mr. Rogers. The level of attention, focus, respect. Mr. Rogers only breaks eye contact with Joan when he reaches down to pull out his puppet, King Friday. If you don't know, King Friday sits on the throne of the neighborhood of make-believe, just like his grandfather and his father before him. We don't often get to hear about King Friday's royal lineage, except that it's been a family tradition that peace has been the norm in the neighborhood. For as we learn later on, when it comes to the wars that indeed have been fought elsewhere, King Friday tells his son, Prince Tuesday, that his grandfather and father alike, and now him, believed that there were other ways to solve a problem. King Friday there on national television, there beside Joan Rivers, sings a very convoluted version of Row, Row, Row Your Boat, which if you're familiar with King Friday does not surprise you, and they do so right there from the closest chair to the desk that Joan Rivers is occupying today. And then Mr. Rogers is asked by the host to sing one of his most famous songs, It's You I Like. Maybe you hear it playing in your head right now. We learn in that moment that Joan's own daughter watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and that this is one of her favorite songs. If you don't know what I'm talking about, jump online, not now, like later. Although, thank you for being online now to you, the virtual audience. I know half of these people are gonna open up a window over here and, I know, but that's what I would have done. It's You I Like, Mr. Rogers is to sing, and you've never seen somebody sing so earnestly, so intently. Not even the Pope singing his favorite hymn can hold a candle to Mr. Rogers singing to Joan Rivers. Mr. Rogers genuinely likes Joan Rivers, despite the fact that just moments before, she tried to get him to answer a sexual question. Mr. Rogers sings to Joan Rivers, and Joan Rivers gets embarrassed. Take a second. Joan Rivers died in 2014, but if that name means absolutely anything to you, blushing is not exactly what you associate with Joan Rivers, is it? We don't have a huge staff here at Wauwatosa, Presbyterian, you know that, but it turns out that two of us have met Mr. Rogers, Lisa Lynn, and sitting in the office, and maybe you have too. Have any of you met Mr. Rogers before? No. What's that? Your sister? Pam, did you? Who? Who's raising their hand? Bonnie. Bonnie met Mr. Rogers. The Presbyterian universe seems awfully large and unwieldy sometimes, but not in some circles, not in the Mr. Rogers circles, because I know all sorts of folks from Pittsburgh, which is where Mr. Rogers was headquartered, who attended Mr. Rogers' family church, who said that they knew him, those who had met him, those who shook his hand, worked with him one way or another, and all of them say exactly the same thing. The same thing that Joan Rivers found out really quick, that the man in the cardigan and the Sperry canvas shoes, who had neighbors popping over literally all the time, who talked to kids like they were the beloved children that they were, who sang songs about being neighbors in between trips to a place called the Neighborhood of Make-Believe. Mr. Rogers was exactly who you hoped he was. History reminds us that, of course, nobody is perfect. History reminds us that we're all products of our times. But apart from a single segment called, and I'm not making this up, called, Is Mr. Rogers Ruining Kids? It aired on Fox and Friends in 2003. One of the hosts there in the middle of the segment called Mr. Rogers an evil, evil man. But apart from that, I don't know anybody who thinks that the Mr. Rogers the generations have come to know is anything truly than sincere. Truly, it was you that he liked. And in November 1983, to end the last episode entitled Conflict, Mr. Rogers broke from tradition and sang a song called Peace and Quiet. Peace, peace, peace. We all want peace. Mr. Rogers wanted peace in a season marked by war. If you asked Mr. Rogers, if you asked Reverend Fred Rogers what he learned about peace in seminary, Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, his alma mater, I feel that it's safe to say that given the time that he was there and the state of the world, even as peace is mentioned over 100 times in the New Testament alone, few have any experience of peace. Far few beyond the neighborhood of make-believe have any experience of peace, apart from where it can be reliably found, one to another. But even then, peace can be elusive. You see, peace as it's used in scriptures was never intended to be a solely conceptual reality. Peace I leave with you, peace I give to you. I do not give as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid. The Gospel of John, spoken by Jesus. That, friends, that kind of peace is a sense of wholeness. It's well-being. It's being in right relationship with the world, with each other. That's the kind of peace we talk about when you hear me, when you hear anyone stand here or stand elsewhere out into the world and say, grace and peace to you. It's become so familiar, but grace and peace to you is a radical statement. It's a statement of gratitude for salvation, how grace restores our neighborhoods and places us back into community with one another. Peace, as the scriptures understand it, is a relationship. Peace is a neighborhood. It's side by side. It's house-to-house kind of reality that depends on grace extended, that depends on grace received. Peace is a bridge that can connect us, but only if we build it. Peace is a bridge that can connect us only if we cross it, only if we put on our shoes, like Ephesians says, and we're ready to cross over to somewhere, to someone, and be personally responsible for lacing up your own shoes and proclaiming peace. Sometimes it's shoes and sometimes it's sandals in Ephesians. It all comes part of a larger section on the armor of God, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. There's the shield and the breastplate and the sword, and then the shoes or the sandals. And they're all for an intended purpose, but all are just simply equally useless unless you put them on. All are existing, of course, metaphorical, of course, because peace is elusive. Isn't that right? Peace is elusive here and now. Peace is always elusive. And in October of 1983, the United States took 4 days and reminded us of such, invading the small island nation of Grenada. I have nothing to say on the merits of the matter, simply the timing. In October of 1983, then 1 month later, November of 1983, Mr. Rogers began this 5-episode series simply entitled Conflict. And that's the story I'd like to share with you today. It begins in Prince Tuesday's class. He goes to school with all the other neighborhood kids, and they're learning about geography, as kids are wont to do. The neighboring countries bordering King Friday's domain. Prince Tuesday is the eldest son. And now we learn there's above land and down under land, and those are two such countries, but the teacher reminds the one who supplies the answer, one Anna Platypus, that, dear, it used to be down under land, but not anymore. It turns out that sidestep land went to war with down under land. And now we call it sidestep land. because Down Underland no longer exists. And the topic shifts to war just like that. The children agree that they do not want to live in a land of war. Not now, not ever. They're afraid of war, despite not a single one of them ever having experienced it firsthand. And subtly, it's just abundantly clear, isn't it, that you and I do not need to experience evils to call them evil. You and I do not need to experience war to hate and loathe war. You and I do not need to experience the evils of the world in order to do what we can, what we have, when we have it, for as long as we can, to call evil, evil. The class wonders now if their own neighborhood has ever fought with its neighbors. We do know that in 1968, literally Fred Rogers' first televised national broadcast, that King Friday figured that the land of make-believe was under attack. He built up barbed wire fences, stationed guards, and tried to shoot down what he thought were paratroopers, but were balloons with messages of peace. When it comes to whether a neighborhood of make-believe has ever had war, Miss Crow, the teacher, isn't so sure. She thinks the answer is no. She thinks that, of course, that there have been fights and there are arguments. Yes, that's the way of the world. There have been fights and the arguments in the neighborhood, but not with guns and bombs and stuff, as Daniel Tiger seems to think. That'd be awful, wouldn't it? They all agree, except for the royal Prince Tuesday. That would be awful. Unless you win, he says. Then you get to take everything that the losers have. The rationalization of a young prince. Prince Tuesday decides to ask his father. In the royal castle, the king replies, "No wars for the neighborhood, but his mind is somewhere else." King Friday has learned that a neighboring country, a mysterious place called Southwood, has ordered 1 million parts. 1 million parts. And Southwood has a history of war. 1 million parts, and Southwood does know how to build bombs and bullets and stuff. And the king has no idea what they're making, but he knows that they might be building bombs. He knows that they might be building bombs, and that's enough for him. That's enough to conscript the entire neighborhood of make-believe to begin building bombs together and begin training their generals for war. Wars and rumors of wars. It's like they say in the Old Testament. The neighborhood of make-believe raids the treasury. They buy 1,000,001 parts because the king knows that they might be building bombs. Later, Lady Aberlin is the king's niece. She objects to the drumbeat coming out of the royal castle. She appears before the king, her uncle. "No time for discussion," says the king. "Come to AB room and build bombs," is his instruction. Lady Aberlin refuses. "If Southwood is building bombs, we must do the same," says the king, "if they are preparing for war." If. But Lady Aberlin reminds the king he doesn't know. In fact, she reminds the king that we don't even know the people of Southwood. It's true. Despite the fact that they share a border, despite being just simply across the river, the neighborhood does not know Southwood. Nobody goes to Southwood, we learn. No one welcomes those from Southwood. There are only figments of the king's anxieties. Just like him, equally capable of good, equally capable of bad. Just like you, just like me. And because, in the king's rationale, because we can build bombs with 1 million parts, Southwood can too. So, the neighborhood builds bombs for the king. Because war is far easier than peace. And building bombs is far easier than building peace. The neighborhood is not so very make-believe anymore. Now, is it? One of the true characters of the neighborhood of make-believe is a woman named Lady Elaine. She's the only one who stands up to King Friday on the regular, so Lady Aberlin enlists her. They band together. They raise up a coalition of citizens to object. They decide to become a 2-person peace delegation to Southwood. Because when they thought about it, they only really knew one person who knew anybody in Southwood, and it was Lady Elaine, a former classmate from a long, long time ago, a woman named Betty. Betty is the only connection to be found to their neighbors to the south. Mr. Rogers described the character of Lady Elaine as the one who turns things upside down, and that's certainly the case here. You see, friends, though a parable intended for children so very long ago, without these two women, we would never learn that Southwood loves peace. They love peace as those familiar with war often do. Lady Elaine's former classmate, Betty, explains that if there's anything truly wonderful, it's peace. This is the first time anyone has heard from Southwood. Such a commitment to peace among Southwooders, Betty tells the delegation that you won't find any war down here, not with us. Not that anybody other than Southwood would know, because nobody ever comes down to Southwood, as it turns out. Nobody knows them. After learning and seeing and experiencing Southwood face to face, Lady Aberlin sums it up very quickly. That's her there. Well, I see that that you all here in Southwood are very much like we are. Saying this in a way that children could understand, I see that you like good things to eat, and you like peace, and you like people to come and visit, and you think wars are terrible things. Through fear and warmongering, King Friday has bankrupted the neighborhood of make-believe to buy 1,000,001 parts to make bombs, and now we learn what Southwood has been up to. 1,000,000 parts purchased by these mysterious neighbors from the south, not to build bombs, not to wage war, but 1,000,001 parts to build a bridge. A bridge that connects Southwood to the neighborhood of make-believe. Because, as they say, neighbors that love peace should invest in establishing a lasting, loving connection with each other. Those who have known war and know how to make bombs and bullets and stuff have instead invested in a bridge. The story ends with the realization on the part of King Friday, a delegation from Southwood has crossed the bridge. A peace party is underway, and low-key, my favorite part of the story is that to celebrate, they have peace pancakes. Southwood and neighborhood of make-believe together, they celebrate the bridge and what it represents. In a beautiful moment, as the last episode ends, Keith David, the builder of the bridge, he finds himself with a few spare parts that the neighborhood thought was intended for building bombs, but he cobbles it together. He takes the parts that we thought were made for bombing and puts them together to build a record player for the children, so now they can dance and sing. The last episode ends, and Mr. Rogers breaks from his usual routine. We're back in his living room. He changes his shoes, he takes off his sweater. But instead of singing "Won't You Be My Neighbor," the song that we all know very well, he sings one that most of us don't. He wrote it for his father some time ago. He sings "Peace and Quiet." And as the song goes, peace and quiet, peace, 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 peace and quiet, peace, peace, peace. We all want peace. And as the episode ends, Mr. Rogers signs off by simply saying, "I wish you peace." And then he walks out the door, leaving us behind to put on our shoes and follow him out into the world. Amen.